Matheson, and I'm so excited to be back filming for you once again. It's been a long 2 years since I've been behind the camera, but a lot has happened in that short time. I've been busy growing multiple companies and baking up a storm every day. While we've got a bit more time on our hands in Australia at the moment, we have been busy baking at home, and I thought how nice would it be to share these recipes with you so you can bake along with me at home. Today I'm trying a new recipe that I've never tried before. This is an everyday gourmet basic butter cake. But I thought, you know what, let's change it up. So I had some apples and some cinnamon sitting around in the cupboard, and I thought this is a great way to show you that you can easily adapt any basic recipe at home and make it ultra delicious. After you bake the cake, I'm going to show you how to make a beautiful custard to go with it. This is going to be the best dessert at home, and I'm sure you'll make your family happy with this one. So the things you'll need is some apples, but obviously these aren't mandatory. So you could easily swap this out with some fresh fruit like pears, nectarines, frozen raspberries, or anything that you have in the cupboard. You need some eggs, we've got 4 here today, some caster sugar, some butter, some cinnamon sugar, which is optional, but I'm adding that on top of my cake just for extra flavor, some really good quality vanilla bean paste, some ground cinnamon if you're making an apple and cinnamon, and just some self-raising flour with a pinch of salt on top. Obviously you'd need a cake tin of some sort. Today I have the ones that we use at work, which is a tall one, but you won't need something that high if you don't have that at home. I always have my trusty spatula from Boxed. These are perfect for anything that you're baking. Today I have here my trusty KitchenAid mixer, which is obviously a household favourite for me. As a professional baker, I can't be anywhere without my mixer, but I know for you guys at home, you probably don't have one of these, or you might just have your trusty old arms with a whisk. That is totally okay for a recipe like this. It doesn't need a lot of beating. So either just use a whisk in a bowl or an electric hand mixer will be fine. So with the KitchenAid, I can easily just pop up the lid just to make no mess. I'm just going to use that spatula just to pop the butter in there. That's been softening at room temperature overnight. It's nice and cold here in Melbourne at the moment, so we need to make sure we leave that out overnight. I'm just going to add my normal caster sugar. Just don't get confused with this recipe. I only have the cinnamon sugar just for topping at the end because I want it really, really cinnamony. So leave that aside. Just make sure you don't pop that in your recipe because it will be too sweet. I'm going to also pop in my 4 eggs. They've been sitting at room temperature, and that just makes it easier to combine. So now I'm just going to turn my mixer on low speed. I just want these to lightly cream. So if you're doing this at home, probably 2 minutes with a whisk would be sufficient. Because it is so cold in Melbourne at the moment, my butter hasn't dissolved as good as it should have been. So if it is not soft enough, just make sure you pop it in the microwave for 10-second bursts until you get it really soft. If it hasn't creamed up enough, just pop it on high for 1 minute just to try break down that butter. While my mix is going, creaming up that butter and sugar and eggs, I'm just going to add a dash of cinnamon into my flour. I already had this in the cupboard, and of course if you're making a vanilla cake you can omit this, but I think it's always really, really nice to have that strong apple and cinnamon flavour because it just takes the dish to another level. So I'm not very fond of measuring ingredients here, so because I've been doing this for many years, I know a splash is good enough. So now that we've got those ingredients mixed together thoroughly, I'm just going to mix in my flour, salt and some cinnamon. This is quite a basic recipe, so it doesn't need a lot of aeration. Like, this is just a perfect cake to eat on the day. It's not really something that you're going to keep for days and days and days like a mud cake. So it doesn't need a lot of mixing or aeration. It's just a really simple recipe you can cook at home. Now I'm going to put this on low speed just to incorporate that flour. You want to ensure when you're incorporating flour not to overmix. So 30 seconds at the tops would be perfect. Just before it's fully incorporated, if you're mixing in some fruits, you want to do that now so it has enough time to incorporate those without overmixing those flours. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So here I've just got half a big tin of pie apples, which are already mushed up perfectly. And I'm just going to add a squeeze of vanilla paste. If you'd like, you can measure that, but it's roughly about a teaspoon. If you're anything like me, a squeeze is the way we measure things. Now I'm just going to put that on for about 15 seconds. You don't want to overmix, especially with fruit in there. You don't want to turn this into a mushy mess. Perfect. That looks great. Now we're just going to take out our beater. remove that from the mixer. We're going to use our spatula just to take off any of that excess batter. This cake's just purely for eating, so don't stress too much about what tin you have. You could even put this in a bundt tin, a round tin, rectangle, whatever you have. So don't stress too much. Like, this is really a versatile recipe that you can add anything to at home. So I'm just gonna quickly give the bowl a good mix with my spatula just to make sure everything is incorporated. And I'm gonna grab my tin and pour that in. So here today I have an 8-inch tin. So I think this is a perfect size. I've actually made double the recipe that's on the Everyday Gourmet website just because it looks so small to me. I'm used to baking in kilos of flour, not 125 grams. So I've done double, which is 250 grams of flour today. I'll leave the recipe and the link to her website in the link below. Oh, this smells so delicious. Now that all my batter's in the tin, I'm just gonna finish it with some cinnamon sugar on top because this will just give it a nice crust when it's baked, and it just gives that extra cinnamon flavor. And it reminds me of cinnamon donuts, my favorite. I'm just gonna sprinkle some of this all over the top, probably a few tablespoons, but whatever you like. So I find it easiest to rotate the tin just to make sure you get right to the edges. If you really had some time up your sleeve, you could mix this with some butter and some flour and make a beautiful crunchy crumble for the top, like you were making an apple crumble. Delicious. So I preheated my oven to 170 degrees Celsius. I'm gonna pop this in for about 30 minutes. I will just have to check it because I've never baked this before. So I'm testing it along with you guys. So I'll let you know exactly how long it takes, but keep in mind when you are baking with fruit, you're always gonna have a longer bake time because you're adding a lot of extra moisture into the batter. This is gonna be so delicious. So while our cake's in the oven, we're gonna make a beautiful creamy homemade vanilla custard. So that can cool down just to the perfect temperature so we can serve the cake both warm and the custard just slightly warm. It's gonna be delicious. So first, we've got half a cup of sugar. We wanna pour just a quarter of a cup, so half of that, into our milk, and we wanna put that on the stove. So come with me, we'll put that on the stove. We want to put this on a high heat to begin with. We just want to bring that to a boil just to ensure that sugar is dissolved and we get that milk to a safe temperature. While the milk's on the stove boiling up, we want to crack our eggs and whisk together our egg yolks and our sugar to make sure we're ready for our custard. So I'm just going to separate out my eggs. Make sure when you're doing this to have the whites go into one bowl and then the yolks to go into another. There's so many uses for egg whites, so make sure you don't waste them. I always use them for macarons because we all know I love a good macaron. And try not to make as much mess as I do. I'm sure if you're baking along with your kids at home, it will be slightly more messy than this anyway. Just remember to make sure you clean as you go so you're not left with a big mess at the end. I'm still in training on that rule, but we're getting there. You just want to keep a close eye on the milk and turn it down when it starts to boil. We don't want this to boil this for too long. And just make sure you give it a whisk to just emulsify that sugar. So now I'm going to turn it down to quite a low heat. I just want this to simmer as I organize my sugar. So now while my milk is just simmering away on the stove, I'm just going to mix together my corn flour and sugar just to make sure we're all ready to go. And that gets one more dish out of the way. I'm just going to use a fork just to quickly mix that together. And we're gonna have some vanilla and butter set aside for the end. Once our custard's fully ready and taken off the stove, we're gonna bring it back over here and just add in our butter and vanilla. So just leave that on your countertop, that's totally fine. You don't wanna do this too early, so just as your milk is already heated, we're gonna just add all this together. So this is your corn flour and your sugar, half your sugar. And now I'm gonna swap to a whisk and just whisk up those egg yolks by hand. And we're just gonna incorporate all that corn flour and sugar and just get them a little bit lighter in color. You can see already how much paler that has gotten just by a quick mix. So you just wanna incorporate those to make it nice and light. We'll make you work hard for the good sugar things in life here. So a good mix is a good workout so you can eat another piece of cake at the end. Now that I've got my ingredients incorporated here, that's all I'm going to need for my custard. So I'm going to take a little bit of that hot milk and just temper my eggs. If I popped all my eggs straight into my hot milk, I could end up with scrambled eggs. And we all know it's not breakfast time at the moment, so we do not want that. So what I'm going to do is add a tiny bit, so probably about half a cup of hot milk into here, just to temper them, to get them warm, and then I'm going to mix it all together back on the stove, and we're going to let that thicken. So now I'm just going to add a little bit of that milk into my eggs, and just make sure you whisk as you do it. Whew. A messy bake is a good one, right? So now that my eggs are warm, I can add that directly to my hot milk mixture on the stove. And we just want to make sure we mix that up. And now we're just going to make sure we maintain whisking on the stove at all times. So this is going to take 3 to 5 minutes to thicken, because that cornstarch is going to heat through and make this a beautiful custard, but we have to make sure it doesn't stick to the bottom. So whisking for 3 to 5 minutes is a must. So make sure you become prepared with your arm muscles, because it's going to be a workout. At the moment you can see how silky and smooth that is. So you can see that the eggs definitely haven't curdled. So that's exactly what we're looking for. And keep this on a low heat, because you don't want to rush this process, otherwise it will stick. You can see how quickly this will thicken up, so you have to make sure you do stay at the stove at all times. If you do think it's progressing a little bit quicker than you'd like, just take it off the heat and move it to another element. And just make sure you're giving it a good mix to make sure we don't stick. So if you're only making a small batch, just make sure you stay close to the stove even more, because it might only take 1 to 2 minutes. Now just return it back to the heat, because you just want to make sure you definitely have cooked through all that corn flour. If you don't have all that corn flour cooked through, you're going to end up with a really starchy custard, and no one wants that. I'm just going to leave this on for another minute. Make sure I stay stirring, but you can see how beautiful and creamy and thick it is. And once I take it off the heat, I can add our last additions in. So this is how you can tell your custard is nice and ready. You can see how much that has thickened, and it's nice and glossy. So I'm just going to give it a whisk for 30 seconds on the bench, just to help cool it down while it's off the heat. And then we'll be ready to add our butter and our vanilla. And that's going to give it a really silky smooth texture to the mouth, and also that vanilla is going to give it a gorgeous flavour. So now I'm just going to pop in my butter. This is just going to melt just from the natural heat of the custard. So now we can just add in a big squirt of vanilla. So the recipe that I use calls for 2 teaspoons, but we all know by now that I don't like measuring, so we'll do that by eye. That looks like 2 teaspoons to me. And vanilla, you can't really go wrong, and it is a beautiful element to any custard, so the more the better. Now I'm just going to whisk those together. When you use a really good quality vanilla bean paste like I have, you will get those natural black specks of vanilla, which is absolutely gorgeous. But if you do want something that looks very clean, like if you're making a custard tart and you don't want those specks in there, definitely opt for a good quality vanilla essence instead. Because this is just going to be a delicious custard to serve on top of our cake, I don't mind that vanilla specks in there. I think the better quality vanilla, the better. So for me, it's all about taste. We just want to mix that just until that butter is all incorporated, which is nearly there. So now I've mixed that through, I want to make sure we tap out all that excess custard. We don't want any of this to go to waste, but do not lick the whisk at this stage, because it is very hot, because it has been boiling on the stove. So just save that one for later. Now the last step is just to put some cling film over the top. It's really important for custard that you actually have the cling film directly on the top of the custard. I know it's scary when you're not used to baking, because you feel like you're going to lose all your custard, the top layer, but this is the only way to do it. If you don't, then you are going to end up with a crusty custard, and no one wants that. So what you're going to do is just push it directly down till it hits the top of that custard. When this is nice and cool or just slightly warm, that will easily peel off, and it just saves it from getting that disgusting dry crust. I'm going to set this aside now until our cake's baked, which will be about another 20 to 30 minutes, and then we can slice it up and pour some of that beautiful custard on top. Okay, my cake's baked now, so all I'm going to do is flip that out, and we're going to cut it into beautiful big pieces so we can enjoy it with some custard. You can either choose to warm up your custard if you like it really soft and warm and liquidy. Otherwise, I like it just as it is, so I'm just going to scoop a big scooping of thick custard on top. Ooh. So as you can see, it's baked beautifully. So it has that really crusty top because of the sugar, and that makes it really nice to eat. So you're just gonna slice that into however big you'd like. I'm so excited to try this recipe because it's such a versatile one. Oh, that looks beautiful. You can see there just how moist it is. So that apple's baked right throughout, and we got that cinnamon sugar on top. That's gonna be beautiful. Now I'm just gonna take off the cling film off the top of the custard. And as you can see, we didn't lose any. So that trick's perfect to make sure you don't get a skin on top of your custard. And as you can see, when it's fully set, you're not gonna waste any as well. So that's perfect. So now I'm just gonna give it a good mix, just to fluff that up a bit. As you can see, that custard is beautiful and glossy. You can just see how beautiful and creamy that is, and you can see those decadent vanilla bean specks in there. Oh, just so beautiful. So now I'm just gonna grab a big scoop and spoon that right over the top. Because that cake is so light and fluffy and moist, it's just gonna spring back at us. But the more the better for custard, I think. You can't go wrong. You can see it's just like a little sponge. Oh, beautiful. If you're not going to eat all the custard straight away, just pop it in an airtight container in the fridge, and that will last a few days as well. You can obviously put that over any dessert. It's really nice with ice cream, apple pies, cake, whatever you like. If you're not going to eat the cake straight away, I'd recommend putting it in an airtight container. Obviously it's the best on the day, but if you are going to eat it tomorrow, just pop it in the microwave with that custard and it'll be beautiful. This cake obviously isn't the prettiest one I've ever made, but this is something that's just so beautiful when you have people coming over for afternoon tea and you're not expecting them around, so you can quickly just whip it up with ingredients that you got in the cupboard. Or it is also very, very adaptable, as I've shown here. I'm gonna give it a try. It is just a basic butter cake with those apples in, so I think it's gonna be delicious, but of course I've got a taste test just in case. This has got custard oozing all over, so I'll give that a try first. Oh my God, you can't beat homemade custard. There's just something about it, just divine. I'm gonna try the cake. That crunch from the cinnamon sugar on top really makes that dish, because you get that really, really crunchy top and then you get that buttery inside. I definitely recommend adding apples and cinnamon sugar if you are doing this recipe. I think white chocolate chunks and raspberries will also be delicious. That custard is just so creamy. Well, I'm gonna go and enjoy this now. So thank you so much for following along, and I definitely give this recipe 2 thumbs up. So if you would like any more videos, put any suggestions in the bottom below, but make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.